Hey everybody, this is a demonstration of the Rails blueprints I designed for Factorio. Note that this is done before version 2.0, which added a bit more flexibility to the bends and alignments of Rails. This means that there could be some improvements made to this design to make it even more compact while still fitting within the city block grid system that I've chosen. So the size of my blocks is based on the range of radars. Zooming in on the center intersection here, you can see that I have a radar smack dab in the middle of the intersection. So these basically form the corners of a grid block, and the rails go along the borders of a grid for the system that I decided on. I also optionally keep roboports along the center of the rail lines, forming a bot network that can reach anywhere on my base that I'd like. If I turn on the bot network filter here, you can see where the yellow is. It covers all of the borders here along the rails. Also, you see a little green area here. It happens to line up with this convenient hazard concrete that I like to put down a lot of times if I'm building some production inside one of these blocks. And the reason for this is a lot of times I like to have a separate robo network inside of a production block. And this robo network is not connected to the global grid network. And the hazard concrete simply marks where they should be separated. Looking back at the intersection, I currently have 8 trains zooming in and out of it from different directions fairly frequently. It does a good job of handling the throughput since it's 2 lanes in each direction, and unlike more classic roundabout, it allows turning in any direction. So that means that yes, it can loop around, but it doesn't have to go all the way around in order to turn left. It can just simply go left. My rails are designed to handle 181 trains, so they shouldn't ever wrap around and block themselves. The chain signals have been placed to allow several paths to get reserved simultaneously by different trains. Moving along one of the sides of a block, let's head up north here. We can see that I've got a couple of stations here along it. And this first station is something that I often like to stamp down if it's somewhere that I want to travel to by manually or with my personal train. So I call these pit stops. So the pit stops don't always have to be built, but when I do, I name them based on a coordinate system. It's plus or minus the x value, and then plus or minus the y value, and then a letter of N, S, W, or E for the for north, south, west, or east. And what this means for this one as an example is, let's say the production block that you saw to the left of here was what I considered my home base, and I wanted that to be 0, 0. Then the block to the right would be the block 1, 0, because the x coordinate is 1. It moves to the right, and the y coordinate is still the same, 0, because it did not move vertically compared to the other block. And then the W is because this particular pit stop is on the west side of that block. Anytime I've got a pit stop or a loading or unloading station, I also add a fuel unload station next to it. So that's what this is right here. It takes a 1-1 train, and it simply keeps track of how much fuel is in the containers, and it disables the station if it gets too full. It unloads onto this belt, which then loads into this container, which can then load the back engine, and then this container, which can load the front engine of a train anytime it happens to stop at the pit stop. And likewise, for any loading and unloading stations that are built stacked on top of these undergrounds can reach to those and have other containers for filling those. This way, I don't need all the big trains to rendezvous at a special refueling station. They simply get their fuel topped off anytime they stop at their regular stations. All right, let's move over here to where I've got an example of a few loading and unloading stations. As long as whatever I put inside of a production block doesn't use up the full space outlined by this hazard concrete here, As long as I don't actually need to use up all of that space, then I can let these stations get stacked here up to as many as 4 loading or unloading stations in addition to the pit stop. And as long as I don't need this space right here for any kind of production, then I can do that, and allows me to unload quite a bit of stuff, or load quite a bit of stuff in a single location. You'll see here I've got examples of both fluid stations and cargo stations. One issue with this design is that a single station will deliver or receive half of its contents on one side of the station, up here, and then the other half down below. And so that can sometimes be annoying because maybe I want to actually combine them together. I want to make sure that I don't only use the top half, and then if the top half gets starved out but then the bottom half is backed up, then it can make very uneven loading and unloading of the train. And so I sometimes combine them back together and mix them back together to avoid that, and that just means I have to take up some additional space here for some belt spaghetti, basically. There's other things that can be done for stations using this general grid system, though. For example, one thing I'm considering doing in the future is maybe building some more some bigger stations with more breathing room and that have queues. So they could take up an entire block just for the stations right here in the center, and I could have several trains queued up for a single station so that the loading and unloading doesn't suffer any gaps of time. Alright, let's take a look at the blueprint book. I've got this designed in a modular way. So here are the rails blueprints. Intersections and throughways have both 1-lane and 2-lane versions. So the throughways are just the straightaways that you see in between the intersections. And everything is 32 by 32 snap to grid so that it's easy to line up. And then for the intersections, the single lane is across the top here, and the double lane versions are across the bottom. Having the single lane versions is nice so that if I'm in the earlier stages of the game, I can lay down less rails, use less materials in order to get to where I need to go. I don't need a lot of throughput on my rail network early in the game. So the single lane version is nice, especially because then I can come along later and be like, okay, dang, I'm getting clogged with my trains. I need more lanes for throughput. Then I can just build right on top of them. So every one of these single lane versions, if you go to the double lane version, then you can just slap it on top of an already existing single lane version. So we've got, for both single and double lane, we've got the cross intersection to go all 4 directions. And then we got a T intersection. And then an L. And a straightaway. And then a turnaround. Alright, next let's take a look at the stations. Here we've got the pit stop that I was showing you earlier. And then here's the unload fuel that I was showing you earlier. And then here's the load fuel station, which is pretty similar to a regular loading or unloading station. The main differences are it doesn't need nearly as much throughput, so it just loads 4 containers here. And then it's got several rail signals so that I can have a queue of up to 5 1-1 trains. And then these others are for unloading and loading cargo, and then unloading and loading fluid. And I've got them at 4 different levels. So for example, here's the level 1 unload for cargo, and then level 2 is the one that stacks beyond that one, and then level 3 beyond that, and level 4 beyond that, and the belts are aligned so that they don't run into each other at all. And you've got nice output or input of 4 lanes on each side of as high as blue belts. You've got blue belts here, but you could always downgrade them to red or yellow belts. You just gotta, if you do downgrade all the way to yellow belts, just keep in mind that these guys right here, which are the undergrounds that carry the fuel from the fuel unload line, they still need to be red so that they can reach across that far. So yeah, that's it for rails. I'm including a link to the blueprints and a link to my corresponding Reddit post in the description. Thanks for watching, and remember, the factory must grow.